Hi, welcome to Naptime Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian, nutritionist, and owner of Baby Bloom Nutrition and Toddler Test Kitchen. And today I am very excited to have with me the fabulous Diana Rice, who is also a dietitian. She's the Baby Steps dietitian, and you can follow her on all the places, and we'll get into that towards the end, so it gives you a reason to stay tuned. But today we're talking about toddlers and manners, and this is something I've really wanted to talk about for a while because it's all about expectations. We don't know what to expect. So Diana is here to shed some light on what kind of manners we can expect from our kids so that we can make sure our expectations are in line. So thank you so much for joining me, Diana.
My pleasure. I'm super excited to talk about this because I am currently a toddler mama. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and we are managing this a lot right now in my house.
Yeah, that's, and I think that a lot of people are dealing with this right now. My twins are now 7 almost, and little guy's 3. So sometimes, you have questions like, how long can they sit at the table? And should they be using forks? And when do they stop making a mess at the table? And the thing is that a lot of this is like, it's very individual. It's very based on each child, and different personalities are going to come into play here. So we're going to give you some good guidelines, but just remember that kids are different, and kids react to different things and respond differently and develop in different ways. And that's okay too. And if you are concerned, then talk to your doctor about it. Touch base with a pediatric dietitian or feeding therapist to see if your child is growing appropriately, developing appropriately. And in the meantime, we'll give you some general guidelines.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing, when can parents start to expect manners? And the first thing that pops into my head is like, what do we start with? We start with please and thank you. And I did a whole segment on Naptime Nutrition on baby sign language, and please and thank you, and those are pretty common. What is please? I don't even.
Please.
All right.
I know my 2-year-old still uses it, even though she also says the word out loud. And
and thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. So you can do that more, right? So you can start with that, and they'll start to respond back. But I remember seeing this meme that said, you can teach them please and thank you 1,000 times, but the minute you drop an F-bomb, that's like
I know. Well, I think that's an important point. This is true for anything that's going on at the dinner table, is that you are the role model. If you're telling your spouse, give me those mashed potatoes, you can't expect your kid not to talk in a similar way. So I think in the beginning, when you're first hoping that your toddler will learn to, I don't want to even say like act normally or act well at the dinner table, like maybe not act like a disaster at the dinner table. That's my goal. Like my bar is over here.
Yeah, that's more appropriate. Not act like a disaster.
I might say, like, if I were asking my husband to pass me a dish, I'd say, hey, babe, can you pass me that? But if I'm trying to really emphasize to my kid, I might say, Daddy, would you please pass me the mashed potatoes? Just to kind of get it out there. And get it to be something that sticks in their head, because that's the same thing that happens with the F-bombs, is that they hear it from you, and then, they're going to repeat it at some point later. And hopefully it's the good things that are going into their head that you're going to get them to repeat.
Right. So it's all about modeling. And that's the same thing that if we were talking about selective or picky eating, we would also be talking about modeling, about how we need to model food enjoyment. We need to sit down and eat with them. So just like that, if we want our kids to have manners, we need to have manners with each other and between family members. So that's a good point. As far as when they start saying please and thank you, it really runs the gamut, because kids start speaking at different times, and it depends if you start when they're babies with baby sign language, they might start sooner.
Yeah, I think so. I think you can at least give it a go once you see that they're able to do the sign language, or maybe once they have the words for please and thank you, you can certainly give it a go. They're probably not going to be able to rationalize, like, why do I need to say please,
right?
Until they're a little older, maybe even, closer to 3. I'm thinking of my now 2-year-old. She's still just starting to kind of start thinking about why she needs to not hit her sister, or why she needs to say please, those kinds of things. because they're very egocentric from the start.
Right. And that's I was actually just going to say that also. They're very selfish, and that's a developmentally normal place for them to be. That's where they are. So yeah, my 3-year-old is starting to say please and thank you. Sometimes he says it without prompting, and sometimes he needs prompting. And so sometimes I'll say, what's the magic word? And sometimes I'll just repeat what he said, but put please on the end. And so then he knows to repeat it with the please. And so that's a tool that you can use. Okay, so as far as utensils, I really like advising giving them a spoon right away. You know, if you're doing purees, or if you're doing baby-led weaning, if you're doing a mix of the two, which we were also talking about, we're fans of all of the above. I mean, we like baby-led weaning, but not like a hard line. You're not allowed to do anything else type of approach. So you can, if you're doing purees, you can have a spoon and the baby has a spoon, or you can do baby-led weaning style purees where you give them the loaded spoon. And so they start to use utensils at that stage, and it's going to be kind of funny. They're not going to be proficient with it right away. We're not proficient with anything when we first start doing it, right? I mean, kids or adults. There are plenty of things I'm not proficient at, for sure.
The thing about utensils is that, it will likely in the long run make for a neater family meal, but it's just an important skill for them to have developmentally. So you can start, you should start actually putting it on the plate. Well, if you're doing baby-led weaning, you're doing preloaded spoons. So you can put something like Greek yogurt or thick oatmeal on a preloaded spoon. You can be offering them a spoon from 6 months onward. And then you kind of put it on the table, and they can palm it with their hand just like they would a slice of avocado or banana, and bring it to their mouth that way. If you're doing it that way, then it's kind of normal that they've always had a spoon, and it's not like you've got suddenly an 18-month-old who's always been spoon-fed, who suddenly you want to teach the skill of using a spoon on his or her own, and the kid is like, no, mom feeds me, what is this?
That's a more difficult transition.
So there's absolutely no harm in putting a spoon or a fork on their plate from the get-go. And I even advise parents sometimes, if their child is not yet ready to start solids, say the child's like 5 months old, but they are sitting in a high chair with the family at the family meal, give them a spoon or a fork to bang around on the high chair so they kind of feel like they're doing the same thing that the grown-ups are doing, and it primes them for when you do introduce food. But there are a lot of, I actually have a blog post on my website about some of the products that are a little bit more developmentally appropriate for really little kids. So you don't, certainly don't give them an actual table fork that you or your spouse would be using. There are more ones that are more appropriate for their little hands.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good point, involving them from an age even before they have food. So you're going to start around 6 months, especially with the spoon, but if you have an appropriate fork, you can do that as well. But you're expecting that by about 15 months to 2 years, they're proficient with it. And if you do start at 6 months, that will likely happen sooner. It's just to keep your expectations in line. If you have a 10-month-old who's still, trying to eat and getting it on their face, that is completely normal, and that's fine.
And I've seen a real range. I've seen 10-month-olds that can spoon feed with an actual, baby spoon. And I've seen some that just don't seem interested, and they're like, well, why would I use that? I've got these perfectly good fingers. So the key with that is to keep putting it on the tray. And, it's going to vary for kid by kid what they're capable of and when that occurs. But I think another important point is that when do we expect kids to, let's say you're having macaroni and cheese. I would probably prefer that my kid eat macaroni and cheese with a fork or a spoon, instead of grabbing it and making a big mess. But I think it's important not to push the child too hard to consume the food in the way that you think he or she should be consuming it, because we want the dinner table to be a comfortable environment. Who knows what's going on with that kid, whether they have a sensory issue where they prefer to just smash it into their face, or they really don't have the hang of the fork and they're just too hungry to eat it with a fork and they just want to put it in their mouth with their hands. I think that's appropriate for still really young kids, maybe around 2 years old. And in your own home, it could be appropriate, for the foreseeable future. You can talk about how when we go to grandma's house, can we try to use our fork or something like that? But for me, I like for my kids to, you know, feel that the dinner table is a comfortable and safe place. So, you know, I even read that, you know, whoever that person who used to write about manners from newspapers, those far gone newspapers that we all used to read.
Do you mean Emily Post?
Yeah, I think that sounds, yeah. I read that it's appropriate for adults to use their fingers to eat asparagus. Like, you don't have to try to get asparagus. Like, yes, with broccoli, you absolutely have to use a fork. Those are the manners. But with asparagus, we all get a pass on eating with our fingers. And I think it's kind of cool to have rules like that in your house. Like, maybe if it's going to be soup, we're going to use a spoon. But, you know, with something else, with pasta, if they are more comfortable getting it to their mouth with their hands, that's a rule in your house.
Right.
But you can talk about how, you know, it might be different in other places.
Right. And yeah, and that's a great way to talk about how different things happen in different places and how people are different and experience their food different. And in certain cultures, they do eat with their hands. These are all fun conversations to have with your kids. Yeah. As far as when you should expect them to be proficient, it's closer to 3.5 or 4 years old when you can expect them to use a fork or a spoon more similar to how an adult would.
Yeah, I think it's around that age. And I'm seeing, so my 2-year-old is coming up on 3, and I'm seeing that in her, but she really loves food. And I know that sometimes she just wants to go for it. But then there's other times where I'll totally blank on, like say it's like fruit, like pineapple or kiwi. I just kind of forget that that's something that you could eat with a fork, but I don't give her one. And she's like, can I have a fork? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. You know, she's setting the rules for that. You know, she doesn't want to get her fingers sticky. There's plenty of kids that do not like to have the textures on their fingers, and they're going to want to use a spoon or a fork from the get-go.
Right. And that's a really great point. In our house, I always grew up using a fork for pancakes, but for some reason when I had kids, we transitioned to eating pancakes with our fingers. And all right, that's just how we do it in our house now. And that wasn't a decision. That's just okay, well, I'm doing it too. And without fail, every time I put forks on the table and nobody touches them, and then I get to put the forks back in the drawer.
Right. Right, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so we covered that. Okay, so this is a big one. Sitting at the table for an extended amount of time.
Oh boy, yes.
It's a big thing because this is especially a generational thing, that we have certain expectations coming from certain generations, and different families handle this in different ways. So what's your take on that?
So I think that it is reasonable to expect a kid who is no longer in a high chair to stay at the table for a certain amount of time. Now, obviously, if they're in the high chair, there's not much they can do about it, although there are kids who will get whiny and say they want down.
Start throwing things.
Yes. By the time they're not in a high chair, it's reasonable. And in fact, I would encourage you to teach your kids that we sit as a family at our table for X amount of time. Now, X amount of time, it's probably going to be 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That is how long their attention span is. And for some kids, that is how long it takes them to eat. So, you know, you can set a timer and say, you know, now we're all starting the meal. It's really important for us to spend together. We're all going to sit here until the timer goes off. And then, you know, once the timer goes off, you can ask the kid if they're done with the meal. But that brings us to another important point. The kids shouldn't be running back and forth. I'm going to take a bite. I'm going to go play. I'm going to take a bite.
Right.
I'm going to go play. You know,
right.
At table or lunch or whatever happens at the table. So you're also going to be coaching your kid to understand if you leave the table, that means the meal is all done. So,
yeah.
I mean, you will be drilling this into your kids' heads for several years.
It does take a long time, and especially if you're starting out from a place where you've been allowing that behavior and you make a shift. And of course, I have a nap time nutrition for that. For when you change routines, there's a specific way to address that as well. But it is important. And I think that on the flip side, adults need to be conscious of what the topic of conversation is. If they're expecting the kids to sit at the table, they shouldn't be talking about politics. Okay, if they expect the kids to sit at the table with them, then they should be talking about something that involves the kids or is interesting to the kids. There is going to be time for adult time as well. And as the kids get older, the conversation can mature appropriately as well. But
yeah,
it's difficult to expect a child to sit at a table when their tummy's full and stay there hearing about the parents' passionate ideas about the current political situation. Like, no kid wants, I don't want to sit there for that.
Sure. Yeah, that's really important. And I think that brings us to another point is that, I usually take longer than 5 or 10 minutes to eat my own dinner, as does my spouse. And when the kids choose that they are all done and they want to run off and play, Mommy, can I have some water? Mommy, can you open this bag for me? Mommy, I'm going to say no. Mommy is still eating her dinner. You can play quietly until I am done. And that's something else that they're learning is that time sitting at the table with my husband is important to me. And I'm not going to drop everything and start eating sporadically myself because I can't find time to sit at the table. Granted, it's a lot easier to do for dinner when my spouse is there. Right now, I'm home full time with both of my kids, and if I've got them for 10 minutes sitting at the table, well, I've got 10 minutes to do the dishes. But wait a minute,
I know it's really hard.
Eat. When am I supposed to eat? So
right,
kind of gets snowballed.
Yeah. It's really difficult. And to take a step back, you're saying that you want to sit at the table and enjoy your own meal. That also means that you're sitting at the table. Yeah. A lot of times, never mind the natural desire to multitask, which is, I think, an epidemic of its own. It's very important. Hi, honey. It's very important to it's very important to sit down with your kids and to put stuff on the table and sit down with them. You put everything out so that you're not running back and forth to the kitchen, getting this and getting that and getting the other thing. You want to, going back to our point about modeling, you want to sit at the table with them and show them what it looks like, and then keep things kind of interactive with them. And that's why I actually created the book that I just came out with on Amazon, Beyond a Bite, which is mindfulness activities for kids at the table. Mindfulness for adults, a lot of times we think of quiet and contemplation and thinking about our belly buttons. And that's not what it is for kids. For kids, mindfulness is, how loud can I make this carrot crunch? And so that's what I did with that book. So if you're looking for that kind of resource, that's available. And I'm going to excuse myself for just a sec to see what this buzzing fly needs.
So
right now.
What that makes me think of too is because when you're teaching kids mindfulness at the table, when you're teaching them the expectation that they will be sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes, I think it's also important to be teaching them that mom deserves to sit and eat and enjoy a full meal until her belly is full and with no distractions, because mommy is a person too.
Mm-hmm.
And we should respect that, So that's another thing that I have been drilling into my kids' heads for a while. But I hope that they will see that as they grow up, they will remember that to take care of themselves in that way,
right?
Whether kids or not,
Right, and it's all coming back to modeling. That a lot of times we think about the behavior that we want from our kids right in that moment, and the point you're bringing up is much more forward thinking than that. Yeah. Just showing them, I'm a person, I'm respecting my body. You are expected to see yourself as a worthwhile person and respect your body as well. And that's an invaluable point. I mean, if there's nothing else we can teach our kids, it's that they should respect themselves and others. And so much good comes from that. So if we can model that, then we can really drive home that point.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, because when we think about manners, we mostly think about being nice and being on good behavior, which is very much a short-term thing. Like, you're basically putting on a good show, like grandma or whatever, if you're over at her house. But what we're talking about it's much more than that. It's about respecting yourself and your family long-term.
Yes.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. Wow. I think we got something right there. Yeah. Okay, so we talked about please and thank you. Okay, not making a huge mess at the table.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is a huge thing, especially with food introduction. It may be very frustrating, the mess that comes either with purees or especially with baby-led weaning. A lot of times we make the joke that you should have a family dog.
Yeah.
But it's going to be messy, and that's okay, because much like you fall down on your butt when you're learning to walk, learning to eat is a process. Learning to speak is a process. Learning to broadcast live on Facebook while making chocolate chip cookies is a process.
Yes, absolutely. And so this is a very good point that I want to get across to, if we're talking about people starting their infants on food, a lot of people choose purees because it's seemingly less messy. But whether you're doing purees or baby-led weaning, it's actually really important to let your kid get messy. If you're doing purees and you're, a little bit of what the carrot puree gets on your kid's chin and you're scraping it up, that's actually really uncomfortable for the kid. And they learn to have a spoon aversion, because every time this delicious carrot puree shows up, I get my face scraped and I don't like that. And so I see that spoon coming and I don't want that. So purees are not necessarily they're going to be, to a degree, a little bit cleaner, because you're not going to have like ground beef on your floor like I did for several years on end. But letting the kid get messy is a huge part of letting him or her learn how to eat. So yes, with baby-led weaning, it's just going to be really messy. It's going to be really, really messy. But I think it's important to let kids get and stay messy to the degree that it's part of their natural feeding process. So let's say, I gave my 2-year-old yogurt this morning. She's almost 3, actually. She had yogurt all over her face. She's almost 3 years old. I've never said a word to her about, now when we eat the yogurt, we put it in our mouth, we don't get it on our face, or I certainly wipe her face, but I don't teach her like every bite needs a wipe, wipe. Because I don't want that to be uncomfortable for her. I want her to know that when she eats food, she's expressing herself however, is best for her. My other kid, I don't know, she never was quite as messy. I don't know, maybe it's just a natural thing. That said, if the kid is intentionally flinging peas across the table, that's not part of feeding herself. I'm bored. Out of here. I feel like getting under mommy's skin. I'm gonna finish.
Right, and it's a great distinction. There's a natural messy that occurs when you're eating, and that's okay. And you also briefly mentioned, I just want to really emphasize this, not cleaning up between each bite. I mean, you got into the thing with the spoon, but also even with wipes or napkins, we don't want to clean up the child between each bite, because it disrupts the feeding process. It disrupts the meal enjoyment. And we really do want to create that safe environment that you were mentioning at the table.
Creating a safe environment for the kid can also be providing them with either a napkin or like a wet towel, if they are the kind of child who does not want that feeling of being messy either on their hands or on their face, and maybe would be averse to eating something like yogurt, knowing that they can't fully control it, they can't always get it in their mouth. Give that child a wet wipe or a wet towel or something so that they can be in charge of cleaning up. If they're uncomfortable. My kids are not uncomfortable with it. They will. I have pictures of one of my kids with yogurt on the back of her head.
I'm walking. My kids are being too loud, and I'm not going to yell at them because they're screaming, "I love you, mommy!" But at the same time, I'd like to focus on this. It's like the double-edged sword of parenting. So now you get to see my messy office. So I think these are all really good points, that there's some cleanliness is good in providing them with an opportunity to clean themselves up, but not creating an uncomfortable environment for them where you're cleaning them up every 5 seconds. That's we all, adults and children, want a comfortable, happy, safe place at the table. And so it's our job as parents to create that for the kids. And so you were about to get into the kid throwing their peas. Such a common issue where kids are throwing food.
Yeah. So when a kid is throwing food, I hear that most of the complaints I have around this are usually when the kid is under age 1 or maybe under age 2. When over age 2 or 3, I think that the kid has the mental capacity to understand that this is not something that's allowed. Under that age, they are probably doing it out of either boredom or to express that they don't want this food. So, a lot of people, like, you throw your green beans on the floor. Okay, mommy's going to put it right back on your plate. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. Your kid is telling you they don't want that food anymore, and they would like to get a rise out of you by throwing it on the floor. Right. So, basically the best, and I'm talking about age 1 or 2, the best approach is to ignore it. Essentially, have a mat under the high chair or something so that they can, the cleanup on your end is not as insane. Over that age, that's the same as you don't throw a ball in your sister's face, right? You know, like it's just not something that's allowed. We can throw a ball. We can't throw a ball in our sister's face. We can eat our green beans. We can say, no, thank you. We don't want our green beans, but we can't throw them across the table. Or, I mean, going back to the yogurt example, my kids love to just finger paint with yogurt at the table, which I draw a distinction between I got yogurt all over my face because I'm just not very good at getting it into my mouth with a spoon, and I'm bored. Finger painting is fun. I'm going to do finger painting now. That's when we say, okay, all done. We'll do real finger painting later.
Right. It makes sense. You know, okay, so we have a question from the audience. I love the live questions. I don't get them that often. So Rebecca says, what if they do it because they like feeding the dog? So thank you, Rebecca. Thanks for joining us.
That is one I get a lot. And I don't actually have a dog, so I don't have any personal experience with this.
You don't have you do baby-led weaning and you don't have a dog?
I know. And actually, like, I remember because I teach baby-led weaning workshops, and sometimes I'll have clients who did baby-led weaning with their older kid or something like that. And when I'm covering how messy it is, I'm like, listen, ladies, it is messy. You're going to be cleaning this up every single night. And somebody's like, no, I mean, my dog just mostly cleaned it up. And I'm like, oh, really? I don't have a dog. I've never owned a dog. I don't know what dogs eat. Like, your dog eats green beans and peas? Okay.
Oh, sure. My dogs learned to station themselves. We had 2 dogs.
Yeah.
One under each twin.
So it depends. I mean, obviously your dogs are part of your family. You want them to be part of the family meal. If the kid is intentionally feeding the dog, it may be time to put the dogs in another room for the duration that it takes for the kid to learn that this is not acceptable. And or if they don't have the mental capacity at that age to learn that it's not acceptable, then until they get to the age where, you know, it's same as, you know, not throwing a ball in your sister's face. Like, this is not something that's allowed. Right. I mean, and again, you're going to be setting the rules in your house. Maybe you want your dog to eat a bunch of green beans and peas. I don't know what people feed their dogs. You know, it could be something like, okay, when we're all done, now we have the fun game of feeding the dog, you know, or something. Yeah. But if they're intentionally doing it because it's entertaining to them, entertaining themselves and via the dog is not part of the meal. You know, like it's, you know, we're engaging with each other. We're learning how to actually feed ourselves. It's not something that's part of the meal. So the dogs may need to go in another room temporarily if it's that important, or how, to whatever degree you can emphasize to the child, this is not something that's done.
And I think I just want to emphasize one of the points you made about including the children in feeding the dog. Mm-hmm. That could be the other half of it, that during the meal, you limit the exposure with the dog. And then after the meal or before the meal, you either give the child a treat and have them give the treat to the dog, or you even, depending on the age, make it the child's job to fill up the dog bowl. It's really good to involve the kids with the family pet. It's just good to keep it away from the table.
Yeah, absolutely. It gives them that sort of ownership of the experience of like, oh, the dog doesn't eat my food, the dog eats his food. And, you know, understand. It's just like when we watch YouTube videos of how, you know, koalas eat leaves. Oh, how cool is that? It's very different from how we do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's a great question. So thank you, Rebecca, for that question, because we always talk about animals at the table, but we haven't actually addressed that specific point. So that was a good one. If anyone else is watching and has a question, please feel free to contribute. So a lot of this is coming back to expectations, because in general, well, in life, but in parenting specifically, if our expectations are off kilter, if our expectations are higher than what our children are able to meet, we tend to build ourselves up for frustration, and we set our kids up for failure. We set ourselves up for frustration. So it's really good to keep in mind what our expectations of our kids are, and also what our expectations of ourselves are.
Yeah. So when I was pregnant with my oldest baby, hadn't become a mom yet, my own mom told me, Diana, just want to share something with you. When all else fails, lower your expectations. And at the time, I was like, what? like, you know, at the time I was like really into like eating all organic and composting, and I still do some of those things. But, you know, I would be like, if something was cute, like I would wash out my plastic baggies and dry them on the sink. And then like my husband would be asleep by the time I was done, like cleaning up everything in the kitchen. And at the time I was like, but my expectations are my standards. And, you know, I can't just lower my standards. You know, I'm trying to build a life for my family that I believe in and I can be proud of. And like, finally I realized like, maybe I shouldn't be washing out the baggies if it's going to keep me up until 12:30 at night. And I'm resentful of my husband for going to sleep. And like, you know, surely either I can just come to terms with throwing away the baggies, or I can use some more Tupperwares or something that I can put in the dishwasher. And that's just one example. You know, the other one with organic food, you know what? Sometimes if I'm trying to stick with my grocery budget and I'm getting really frustrated, yeah, I don't buy, actually, really, really, really often I don't buy organic food. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like an organic crazy person, but I used to, and I've since lowered my expectations surrounding all of that, because it gives me more peace of mind in terms of how I have the mental space to go about my day. And this certainly plays into feeding kids, because you know, you can think when you're pregnant, oh, my kid's going to eat the organic carrot puree that I'm gonna make by myself, and you know, and you know, we're gonna try all these different flavors with baby-led weaning. She's gonna love everything, and then you're like, oh, wait a second, this is terrible.
My child has a mind of her own. What?
So, you know, I think that there's a couple of things that I would never compromise on in my house. Certainly, you know, we maintain the division of responsibility. I'm never, even if my child refuses to eat her dinner, I'm never going to say you need to take 3 bites or whatever like that. That's, for me, that's crossing a line. I'm not going to compromise the division of responsibility. But there's other things like the amount of mess that happens at the table. You know, if she's having a really good time with that yogurt face painting and I'm just want to kind of sit here and enjoy my glass of wine and she's not getting out of the high chair, so I'm like, you know what, I'll clean it up. I'll clean it up later, you know. And that's both taking something off of my plate because I don't have to like stop my meal and discipline her. And it's just creating an enjoyable family meal. Like it's a fun environment in that case. You know, if she's flinging peas in her sister's eye, that's not okay, because, you know, I'm not going to let her hurt her sister like that. But, you know, having those expectations and understanding they can be a little bit flexible. And then also that, you know, maybe we don't have to have our kids wiping their face with their napkins and, you know, saying please and thank you for every everything that they want. I don't actually enforce please and thank you too much, so long as they ask in a polite way. So if we say, Daddy, could you pass the peas? Okay, she didn't say please, but like she didn't say, Dad, more peas.
Yeah, I think that's a really good distinction to make. And I think also there was a point I didn't put on our outline, but we have a nighttime routine before going to bed, and every family's nighttime routine is different. We have a morning routine. So it's okay to also have a mealtime routine where everyone goes and washes their hands and they come to the table. Maybe as the kids get older, they help set the table, but it's everything that, it's consistent at each meal, and it helps to set up the expectations. If you're having behavior issues at the table, something that you can do to be proactive is go over the expectations when you sit down. We're sitting down for a meal now. Here are the expectations. You're going to sit still, and, you know, within reason. Your tushy stays on the seat. Do not go into anyone else's bubble if they don't want you to be there. Do not lay your head on your brother's plate, you know. And I'm getting a little silly there, but this is what I do with my family, just to kind of preempt some behavior issues that have been common. Just to say, hey, this is just a reminder. This is what we do at mealtime. Now let's all eat together and have a good time.
Yeah, and that's really important because, so like recently we've been having trouble getting my younger one to brush her teeth. And we were kind of just chasing her around the house with the toothbrush, trying to get her to stand still, trying to get her like, first mommy goes, then you go. And it clicked in my head that I'm supposed to, I do the mealtime routine that you just described, but, you know, as a dietitian, teeth brushing is out of my realm, so I didn't really give it much thought. And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, we need to. everybody goes to the bathroom now, and, have a comfortable stool for her to stand on. And, okay, first mommy's going to brush it, then you get to brush your own. And then it suddenly got a lot easier after we implemented that. And I was thinking, why didn't I extend that? Hi. In a minute. Why didn't I extend what I expect out of my mealtime to the teeth brushing routine? But for someone who hasn't been doing a routine like that for mealtime, and you're frustrated with, how things are going, that's definitely the first line to implement in terms of, getting things to be more smooth, because kids thrive on familiarity like that. You've got a bedtime routine, you've got, a teeth brushing routine, you've got a family meal routine. I did want to mention, in terms of kids staying in their seats, it is really important that the seat is appropriate for the kid. So this happens a lot when kids come out of their high chairs. Hopefully with your high chair, you have one that has trunk support and foot support, but we can't automatically expect a 3-year-old to sit in an adult chair like the one I'm sitting in now. It's not built for them, and it can be uncomfortable. And a lot of the squirming and the wiggling and wanting to get out of the seat is because the seat in and of itself is uncomfortable. So that's that's something else I would suggest to parents take a look at if they are having trouble with kids staying at the table, is maybe you need a booster seat or, some other child appropriate seat. But, imagine how uncomfortable you would be if you were sitting at a bar in a regular chair and trying to eat your food up here like this. You probably want to, get out of there in whatever way or shape you could. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And actually, I was going to bring up the transition from high chair to seat, because someone had contacted me saying she was watching. She's got triplets who are going to be moving from their high chairs to their seats. And God bless her, she's so patient and wonderful with her children.
Yeah. So that's, another thing is that, and it might be an investment to buy 3 age-appropriate chairs or booster seats. But, you think about it like, if you're going to spend whatever, $100 on a pair of jeans that you're going to wear every day, well, then the cost per use is a lot lower. But it can be like, I remember looking into booster seats when my kid first transitioned, and that was like $40. And then I was like, oh, actually, this probably would help her out a lot.
Yeah, it makes a big difference. It really does. Yeah.
But for triplets, oh my God. I'm sure she's pretty used to spending 3 times as much as she would on regular stuff. But
I know, when I was having my twins, people would say, oh, buy one, get one free. Yeah, you try putting 2 kids in one car seat. That's not happening. Right. It is certainly not buy one, get one free, not even the hospital bills. So, so quit it with that joke for us poor moms of multiples. Yeah. And so we want to create a happy, healthy environment at the table. And much like you mentioned brushing your teeth, there are certain points during childhood where kids are going to put up a fight: showering, brushing their teeth, potty training, going to bed. And at the table, these are your main pressure points. These are the main times when your kids are going to fight with you. And you can decide to not engage in that fight. Because if you have one child and one adult, it takes 2 to tango, right? If your kid's fighting you, you can just choose to not fight back, and then it's not a fight. So we say, and the food fight, choose to not fight about food. You pick your battles. Don't pick this one. You do not have to engage.
I use that example all the time when I'm talking to parents about the division of responsibility, and that there's so many things that we essentially, I don't want to say fight, but like, if your kid is going to go to school, they got to wear shoes, right? And so if they're going to be frustrating about putting their shoes on, you're probably going to be engaging in some kind of fight to get the kid to put their shoes on. With feeding, you don't have to. You can just be like, oh, you don't want to eat it? That's cool. I'm not serving you anything else. But, it is what it is. And you don't have to engage, and that takes something off of your plate and can hopefully give you, a little bit of relief in terms of how difficult all of parenting is, and you don't have to make one of those things.
Yeah. Okay. So to go over our main points, we have number 1, appropriate expectations. You don't necessarily know what appropriate is, so you may have to adjust. So that's number 2, adjust your expectations. And 3, don't fight at the table. And What else? Yeah, create a happy, joyful environment at the table. Oh, sit down. You sit down and
Model
eat.
the behaviors for your kid.
Model the behavior. Yeah. And that's where and whatever your kids do, if you're doing those things, your kids will develop to be adults who know how to mind their manners and to know how to treat people respectfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add, make sure that whether it's their utensils or their booster seat or whatever, that they have tools that are comfortable to them, because that can be a big factor as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'll definitely link to the blog post. If you can send me that link, I'll post it below. Okay. So Diana, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you?
Great. Yeah. So my Facebook page is Baby Steps RD, the Baby Steps Dietitian. Most of my other pages are just my name, Diana K. Rice. So that's what I am on Instagram. Don't really use Twitter. My website is dianaKrice.com. And I will shortly be launching a podcast all about motherhood in the early days. And Yaffi will be one of my guests, one of my first guests. And it's all about just how crazy and hard it is to be a mother of young children. I'm calling it Motherhood in the Messy Intersection, because I define the messy intersection as this time where suddenly your body is different, you're responsible for feeding kids, you want to get it right, you don't want to be stressed out, the mental load is just, and I think we all deserve to cut ourselves some slack, but I also want moms to have the tools that they need in terms of putting in best practices in their home to help their kids develop a healthy relationship with food, and to develop that healthy relationship with food themselves if they don't already have it. So that will be launching later this summer. The pandemic put a little bit of a pin in it for me, but Yaffi will be one of my first guests, and all the information on that will be on my Instagram page and Facebook page.
Very excited. Yay. And so we'll definitely link to that when it's available. I'll be pushing that as well, because the more information, the better. We also just started, myself and Danny Leibovitz from Kid Food Explorers started a Facebook group, and you're also, Diana, in the Facebook group, and pitching in some advice, which is awesome. And it's called Growing Adventurous Eaters. So you can join that on Facebook. And you can also find me on Facebook and come to a live toddler test kitchen class when that's possible again. So that's toddlertestkitchen.net, and you can listen to what a cutie! You can listen to Naptime Nutrition on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and iHeartRadio every Sunday, and I have now transitioned a lot of my segments to YouTube, and so you can check out the YouTube Naptime Nutrition, and I've got most of the segments up there for better searchability. So I have covered over 150 unique topics, and got a lot of information up there. So come join me there. And well, that's Naptime Nutrition for today. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Da-da.